Hi everyone, Happy New Year. I hope you're enjoying the start to 2024. I wanted to say I'm so sorry for not having a video out for about 3 weeks now, I think it is. Knowing that my son was going to be out of school from just before Christmas to just after New Year's, I had intended to put out a video for you on December 23rd, that Saturday, where I was going to wish you happy holidays and I hope you have a happy new year. But unfortunately, nature had a different idea and we got a terrific storm come through our area, which knocked over a ton of trees, which then knocked over a ton of electric poles, and a lot of us in Maine were out of electricity. And then when it finally came back on, we then didn't have internet for a few more days. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to take a hint and just enjoy myself and relax and read some books. And we read a ton. We read A Christmas Carol and A Miracle on 34th Street, and we're busy finishing up The Christmasaurus, which is a really cute book. I'm really enjoying it. I also read a vintage book, which is what I am going to talk to you guys about today. For the last year, I have been going into my library's book stacks in the back. In the children's department, I go to the back, and there's like shelves and shelves and shelves of old, forgotten, vintage books that nobody ever takes out. And so I go back there and I just do some exploring, and I'll select 1 or 2 books every month and I'll read them. And if I feel that they stand the test of time, or I feel that they have something still to offer, I'll photograph it and talk about it on my Instagram account. So I thought I would do a video just to talk about the vintage out-of-print books that I've discovered over the last year since I started doing this. This video won't have any shiny new books in it. It's just old books. Some of them aren't very pretty, but what's inside is still amazing. So I really wanted to share it with you. I don't know if you guys remember, but this is the material that I picked up when my mom and I went to Prince Edward Island, and we got it at St. Andrews by the Sea, the little dormice that are sleeping. So anyway, I made these corn bags for a lot of our friends this year as Christmas gifts, as well as my son's teacher and his school principal and the office assistant who does so much for everyone. And so I wanted to show you guys this, and what you do with it is you put it in the microwave for 1.5 minutes and heat it up, and then you can put it under your bed, or if you have sore muscles, you can use it as well. And I love them. All my friends who get them love them and always ask for more. So anyway, it's kind of become my thing. I keep a bag of corn down in the basement. It's not your regular corn. It's the type of corn you get at a feed store. Like, I suppose it's what you feed cows and such. But yeah, and whenever one of my friends wants one, I just pull out the sewing machine and fix one up. So it's kind of my thing that I do for everyone. Anyway, I don't have a coffee today. Today I have my delicious hot chocolate from a local Maine company called Bixby Chocolates, and they do beautiful dark chocolate, truffles and bonbons and all kinds of things. But what I love the most is their hot chocolate mix. So here it is. You can see I kind of took a sip already. It's not, but yeah, so let me take a sip of hot cocoa and we'll get started. Oh, that's divine. So the first book I want to show you is The Patchwork Quilt by Adele DeLeeuw, and her sister, Adele DeLeeuw, did the illustrations, which are just gorgeous. Here's one of them for now. I'll show you another one in a minute. But this book is about a girl who's sick, and she is being cared for by her grandmother. And grandmother tells her that every patch in this quilt has a story that goes with it. So while she's recovering, she points to a patch and she asks her grandmother to tell her a story about it, which her grandmother does. There's a wonderful story that involving a dog, which was just delightful, and it has this beautiful, cozy end to it, and I can't sing this book's praises enough. It was just such a good book. And let me show you some other illustrations by her sister, Adele DeLeeuw. There you go, there's one of them. And there's the puppy, of course, the dog. And here's another one that kind of reminded me of Anne of Green Gables a little, even though the storyline is very different. But I just thought it was cute. But let me read a little passage to you. They say little girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and you're a little girl. Josie said soberly, "What's a little girl really made of, Dr. Garfield?" The doctor answered, "Well, that's a long story, Josie, and I'll tell it to you sometime. Water and salts and iron and fat and things like that. But most important of all is something we can't describe. Spirit, we call it, for a lack of a better name. A kind of goodness." Anyway, and there's all these passages throughout that are just gorgeous like that. And I liked this book so much that it led me to the next two books that I selected that I'm going to show you. One of them is The Strange Garden, and this one was written by both Adele and Adele DeLeeuw and illustrated by Meg Wohlberg, who is the illustrator of the baby food Gerber Company's Babies. It's all about the eyes. You can kind of, if you look at the eyes, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I just found this another beautiful, charming book. It's about a Manx cat, the cats with the short tails. And she's out in the wild, she's out in a garden, and you kind of come to realize gently that she has been abandoned by her owner. And so it kind of starts off a little bit sad, and she gets to know all the animals in this garden. She gets to know the owls, and there's a snake as well. There's this really lovely chapter that is very Rikki-Tikki-Tavi-like almost. And she even becomes sort of a protector for a hatch of rabbits. Hatch of rabbits? Hutch of rabbits. I'm not sure. But anyway, she becomes a protector for a group of rabbits. And she ends up finding a family to love her in the end, so it all turns out well. And it's beautifully illustrated by Meg Wohlberg. An illustration there. An illustration from that one chapter where I told you it was a little Rikki-Tikki-Tavi-like. I love this sister team, and I really hope that they find republication someday. I think they stand the test of time, and they're just gorgeous. And here is, by the way, the cat herself, Mandy, who the story is based upon. The next book I want to show you, another one written by both of the sisters, Adele and Adele DeLeeuw, is The Expandable Browns. And I had such a fun time reading this. It starts in the spring and it goes on until winter, till after Christmas. And it's about a family who are living in a small greenhouse. I think the first line of this whole book is, "The brown house was green." And so they start out in the small house and they decide that the time has come to move into a larger home. And so they drive around looking for a house, and they finally find a house out in the country, a farmhouse, and they all move into this farmhouse. And wouldn't you know, people kind of start moving in with them, moving out, pets, they find a dog, cats, and other pets. This is Aunt Meg who moved in with them. So it starts out with just the Browns, then they get a dog, then they get Aunt Meg, moves in with them for a bit. And so every chapter heading has that kind of sort of thing going on with it. Like here is when their little next door neighbor Kenny moves in with them for a little bit. It's a really great book about kindness and opening your heart to other people. And I love the illustrations as well. These are by Dawn Sibley. Dawn Sibley is one of those artists whose work you find all over children's literature of the 50s and 60s. And I know that he illustrated War and Peace as well, My Friend Flicka, and I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. I think he also illustrated another Adele and Adele DeLeeuw book called The Red Caboose, or something like that, but I'll put a picture of it up on the screen for you too. Here's the house that they find, the farmhouse that they find and move into. Here's another picture of Halloween, which I just thought was adorable. This beautiful picture of Christmas. This is another book with just wonderful seasonal descriptions and descriptions of nature, and I'll read a couple to you. One is in the spring. In the garden, it was almost as good as digging up buried treasure to pull aside some dead leaves and find a cluster of green shoots sticking up through the earth, shoots that Father said would be daffodils, and to come upon a patch of thick, close-growing lavender flowers peeping between some gray rocks, and to race over the grass and stop short because there, under your feet, was an orange crocus that hadn't been there yesterday. Kind of makes me look forward to spring, even though I love winter. I really enjoy winter. Here's another one that is from the winter. It snowed all night, and by morning, when they looked out, everything was deeply covered. It was a fairy world, glittering in the bright sunlight. The trees were weighted with snow, the private hedge had a thick white thatch, the garden was a wide expanse with whirls and swirls of wind on it, and even the garbage can was so mounded with snow that it looked beautiful. They tore through breakfast and into their coats. So I just thought, that is some beautiful writing there. And there's a couple of other books that I would like to read by either Adele DeLeeuw or Adele DeLeeuw or both. And that is, there's Nobody's Doll, Blue Ribbons for Meg, and then there's one called The Hideaway House. Adele and Adele DeLeeuw have Dutch origins, but they were born in Hamilton, Ohio. And Adele eventually moved to New Jersey. She died in 1988, but even now there's a scholarship fund set up in her name where high school students living in New Jersey, Plainfield, New Jersey, can apply for this scholarship. Her sister Cato spent some time in Paris and New York City, and then also ended up settling in New Jersey, I believe. She actually had a different career, but then the Depression hit in the 1930s, and she had to find some other work and ended up illustrating some of her sister's books. She says it ended up being a good thing that happened to her. It's so interesting to read about the lives of some of these authors. Yeah, if you have a local library that carries these types of books, go see if you can find any by Adele and Adele DeLeeuw. You might enjoy yourself. I love them, and if you do, let me know what you think in the comments, or if you have read any of these books, let me know. I'd really love to share thoughts with you. In one of my previous videos, I spoke of a book called No Children, No Pets, which I always used to read at my grandparents' house, and it always made me laugh, and I loved the illustrations so much that I remembered them. And we did actually read that book, and we both loved it. It was great. But that one is in print. I wanted to talk about another book by the same author and illustrator, Marion Holland, called A Tree for Teddy. I think it's also titled The Christmas Tree Crisis. This was such a cute book to read at the start of the Christmas season. Teddy wants a Christmas tree. No Christmas tree will do for his grandmother who's staying with him. She has her traditions that she grew up with, and Christmas Eve arrives, they still don't have a tree. Teddy, he's not happy with that arrangement, so he decides to head out into the forest and cut himself a tree. He takes his friend with him, and his friend gets recruited to look after his friend's little sister. So the three of them head out to the forest, and what do you know, they get lost. And I will let you find out what happens when they get lost. Just a delight. And I'll show you what I mean by Marion Holland's illustrations. I love Marion Holland's illustrations because they show sort of the quirkiness of children and the things that they do. They're so expressive. Here's an example of the two boys having some refreshment. Just the way that they're sitting with their mouths full and happy, and I just think it's really cute. Here's another one with a horse-drawn sleigh that I thought was very festive. If you want a light read for Christmas, this is a good one to go with. The choice of words and such are so modern. Marion Holland writes just the most delightful books. She was a housewife living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and she wrote quite a few children's books, and so far the ones that I've read are just delightful. The next book I want to show you, I was kind of drawn to because it was my August read, and we had just returned from visiting my dad in Texas. And my dad in Texas, he and my stepmom have a, I don't want to call it a cattle ranch, it's more like a bunch of land with cows on it. And this land runs alongside a train track, and so now and then trains go by. And so I saw this one, and I immediately was drawn to it. Marella's Hobby by Jerome Cushman. And this is the story of a cow who has a hobby, and her hobby is getting out to the field and watching the train go by. And one day there is this terrible rainstorm, and the farmer keeps her in the barn, and she's very frustrated because she wants to get outside to enjoy her hobby of watching the train go by. And eventually she does break loose and she takes off, and it's a good thing too because she ends up saving the day. Let me show you a couple of these amazing illustrations. This is another one that's more for young readers. Prue Theobald is an English illustrator whose artwork I just love in this book. It's really cute. There's the farmer, And here's Marella dreaming about the train. And there she goes on her way. And I don't want to show you any more because then I'll give away the end of the book. It's just very cute. I read it to my son too, and he really enjoyed it. It's a quick read. Jerome Cushman is a Chicago-born author who did one other book that I could find, Tom B. and the Joyful Noise, which is set in New Orleans and is about a boy who wants to become a trumpet player, and his family does not want him to become a trumpet player, but he follows his dream. That was the only other one that I could find, but I really liked this one. The next book I want to share with you is The Beech Tree by Pearl S. Buck, and this was such a heartwarming tale. There's a family, and the paternal grandfather comes to live with this family, and the mother is not really loving having grandfather around. She has to do more work cleaning up, etc., etc. And she convinces the father to put him in a nursing home. And Mary Lou, his granddaughter, embarks upon a mission to prove to her mother and father that grandfather's place is at home with the family. And I just loved it. I thought it was amazing. I have a soft spot too for books that show the value of the elderly, that remind us that the elderly have their part to play and that they deserve the respect of people who have lived a long life. I love any book that reminds us of that. So I was drawn to this. Illustrated by Kurt Verth. Here is Mary Lou helping her father with the new designs on the house. They're constructing a new room for grandfather to live in. Mary Lou and grandfather. Mother not being terribly happy, chatting with father. Kurt Verth was a German illustrator who had to flee Germany with his wife because his wife was Jewish. And they came to America, and he continued to illustrate children's books. And one of the artists who was an influence on his work was Paul Cézanne. And I can kind of see it actually when I look at the illustrations. I look at it and I think, oh, I can see that where he took influence from Paul Cézanne. I want to read a couple of quotes to you from this book too. One nice thing about having grandfather in the house was that he always had time to talk. There ought to be one grown-up in every house who has plenty of time to talk, and especially to answer questions. There's another quote in this book that I thought was just really beautiful. Then grandfather said, "That's enough for one day, Mary Lou. We've been thinking big thoughts, and sometimes big thoughts are heavy. If you keep thinking about them, though, they get lighter because you understand them better. The better you understand anything, the easier it is." So anyway, this book is full of pearls of wisdom from her grandfather to Mary Lou. You probably know Pearl S. Buck from her books The Big Wave or The Good Earth. She spent a great deal of her youth in China and wrote a lot about the Chinese culture and rights for women. Really just a great book of hers. It's out of print, and I just think it shouldn't be. It's just a really good, heartwarming tale. So let me know if you've read this. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have read this one. The next book I want to show you is a perfect book to read around New Year's, as it occurs in New York, in Greenwich Village, in fact, on New Year's Eve. And it's written by Rachel Field, who you might know from Hitty, Her First 100 Years, or Calico Bush. I have not read these yet. I keep meaning to read them, especially because Rachel Field spent some time in Maine. In fact, I think she even purchased a home in an island off the coast of Maine. So the book I wanted to talk to you about is called The Magic Pawn Shop, and there's no dust jacket. I'll put up a picture of what it would look like with the dust jacket up here. It is decorated by Elizabeth McKinstry. So 9-year-old Prinda is on a mission to find a cure for her uncle, who is very sick. It is snowy, it's New Year's Eve, we're in New York City, Greenwich Village. She finds a pawn shop near the Jefferson Market clock tower that advertises magic sold here. Inside she meets the shop's owner, Miss Minerva McClune, who is keen to help her, but she's out of magic. So she leaves Prinda in charge of the pawn shop with some special magical items to help her, and she takes off to go replenish her supplies of magic, telling Prinda that she will be back before midnight. And the funny thing is the book is set up like you're going to see a lot of magic happening. And it turns out that you don't actually see that much magic happening, but what you do see is Prinda using her common sense and her wits to bring people together during her hours working in the pawn shop. Great references to Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. Rachel Field was a very interesting person. She was born in New York and actually grew up in Massachusetts in a house that actually made it into a Norman Rockwell painting. And in her childhood, she visited Maine and fell in love with the Maine coastline and eventually purchased a home on Sutton Island. It was on Sutton Island where she wrote Hitty, Her First 100 Years, her most famous book. And she also wrote another book called All This in Heaven Too, which ended up becoming a movie starring Bette Davis. And I think she actually wrote the screenplay for that movie, if I'm not mistaken. She even wrote the English lyrics for Schubert's Ave Maria section that was featured in Disney's Fantasia. And she was shortlisted as one of the possible screenwriters for Gone with the Wind. Unfortunately, she died very young at 48, just weeks before her final book was to be published, And Now Tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And that was also turned into a movie starring Loretta Young. So if you are looking for a really great New Year's Eve read that is magical, but not so much magical because of magic, but magical because of the bringing together of people, then this would be a great book for you. The next couple books that I want to show you are by Margot Benary Ispert, and one is The Shooting Star and the other one is Blue Mystery. This was my latest read and I'll tell you about it in a second. But The Shooting Star begins during the week between Christmas and New Year's, and it plays out up to March. And it is about Annegret and her mother who have pneumonia and move up to a little town in the Swiss Alps to get fresher air to better their health. And they stay at a hotel called the Shooting Star. And it's about their recovery and the people they meet and Annegret learning to have courage. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. I love how Margot Benary Ispert, she must have been a real well-rounded person, because there are so many beautiful things in these books about constellations and stars and planets, but also about botanicals and birds and science in general, mixed in with these beautiful narratives. And this one is illustrated by Oscar Lieberman. Here's one where Annegret is feeding the birds, which I just love this one. And here's in a chapter where they're looking up at the stars. And I have to read you a quote from this one. Before they entered the house, Annegret cast one more look at the brilliant starlit sky. Then she slipped her hand into her mother's so as to reassure herself that she was not alone in this tremendous, awesome world. I thought that was beautiful. But her books are full of gorgeous quotes like that. That quote came at the end of a chapter where the whole chapter was them looking at the universe, the nebulas and the Andromeda galaxy and Jupiter, and it was just really beautiful. It was a gorgeous chapter. There are also literary references in here to Snow White and Rose Red, which I thought was beautiful. And Oscar Lieberman was a Brooklyn-based illustrator. And yeah, I just think his work is gorgeous, and this book in general is just gorgeous. And I highly recommend it if you can find The Shooting Star or any book by Margot Benary. By the way, this book, The Shooting Star, is the precursor to the next one that I want to talk about, which is called Blue Mystery. I just posted about this one on my Instagram account because I just read it this month. And another gorgeous book by this author. I am definitely going to be checking out more of her books. I just love her writing. This one is really beautifully illustrated by Enrico Arno. And I love the illustrations which complement the magic of this book so well. Enrico Arno is another World War II escapee. I think he's a German illustrator who escaped Germany, moved to Italy for a little while, and then made his way to Long Island. and from Long Island is where most of his career took place. Margot Benary Isbert grew up on a farm where her family cultivated plants, and it was a farm where they had established it 300 years previous. So when the Nazis took over, they didn't leave because they just couldn't leave this farm. And then finally the Nazi regime ended. They had their farm back for 10 weeks, and then the Russians took over. So that's when they decided that they had had enough. They moved in with some friends in their apartment for a while, and then made their way to California eventually. That's where she wrote the majority of her children's books, or books. She also has a lot of adult fiction as well. In this book, Margot Benary Isbert brings in her experiences and her childhood before the war. It's before the Nazis, but there is a slight reference to something that might be her speaking out against the Nazis, who were not, as you probably know, were not just against Jewish people and wanted to persecute Jewish people, but other people with disabilities and people of different races. And so there is one remark in the very first chapter where you can see that Margot Benary Isbert is highlighting a mentality, and the whole book basically proves that that mentality is ridiculous. Other than that, I don't really see very much in this book that shows the war and everything they went through. It's all beautiful. It's before wartime, and it's set on their farm. And on this farm, father has been cultivating a flower for over 10 years, and he has come up with this flower, the blue gloxinia. And it's a beautiful blue flower with red in the inside. And as soon as the word gets out that this flower has been cultivated, they're riddled with bids and attempts to purchase it from him, but it's not yet ready for distribution. He needs it to propagate more seeds and to solidify the species. So he tries to tell people to wait. Unfortunately, one of them goes missing, and the suspicion falls on Fridolin, who is a red-headed boy who gets a little mocked for his red hair, kind of Anna Green Gables style, with nicknames of carrots and such. Annegret, she just can't accept that Fridolin is guilty. She feels it in her gut that something else is going on, and with the help of her dog Kara, comes to a happy conclusion. It's a beautiful book. It also has a bit of the mystic to it. The house is called the House of the Toad because there's a frog spirit, a toad spirit, who looks over its inhabitants. And there's also this very mystical dream that occurs to Annegret in one of the chapters that's just beautiful. I want to show you some of the illustrations. So if you check out my Instagram account, you'll see more of these illustrations. But here's just one of them, and they're just gorgeous. This is when she's having a dream. One of the things I wanted to tell you about this is that when I was looking through the pictures, when I was selecting it, I thought it was a book that occurred at Christmas, but actually it turned out that the holiday it celebrates is St. Martin's Day, which is this beautiful holiday that is sort of a mixture between Christmas and Halloween. Children in Germany will make their own paper lanterns and go out at night with these paper lanterns and sing, and people will give them treats when they go out at night. I want to read a quote to you that kind of explains the holiday of St. Martin's a little bit. Aunt Trauta had joined them, bringing Hans and Lore. The girls' lanterns and Hans's big moon-faced pumpkin gave a ghostly light amid the thin gray swirls of mist. From all the side streets, colored dots of lights could be seen bobbing toward Cathedral Square, and everywhere small and large groups could be heard singing. The various choruses and voices seemed to answer one another. The song sounded now from here, now from there, as if echoed and re-echoed. What I also love about this book is its description of family. I don't know if you've been watching The Gilded Age, which I am loving. It was torture when we did not have internet after the storm, and I really wanted to see the final season 2 episode, and I had to wait for it, but it does remind me a little bit of the Russell family. Let me read this part to you. An amazed "ah" rose from the company. The familiar room looked changed beyond recognition in the bluish light that lent a dreamlike quality to everything. It took Annegret a moment to realize where it came from. Mother had made blue gloxinias out of all the lights. In the middle of the long table, where there usually stood an especially beautiful selection of living flowers, she had placed a gigantic artificial blossom of shimmering blue foil with purple lining, and in front of every table setting stood smaller blossoms of the same kind, each with a tiny candle in the center. "The blue mystery," Annegret whispered to Father. "And look, Mother's dress is a blue mystery too. When the skirt swishes, you can see that it's red inside." "I imagine when the bill comes, we're in for another surprise," Father said, but from the way he looked, Annegret could tell that he was happy. Anyway, so I just thought that was cool. I'm kind of mesmerized by all of those dresses that Mrs. Russell wears. Every single episode, there's these beautiful gowns that are just amazing. So that part kind of reminded me of it. Like I said, Margot Venery-Espert's description of seasons and trees and flowers and culture are just magnificent. And let me know if you've read one of her books, because I would love to know. I'm definitely going to be reading more of her work in the next year. Well, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these out-of-print, vintage, beautiful books that I found over the last year. I just want to say also thank you to all of those who subscribed to my channel this year and for your comments and your support. I started my YouTube channel last year in 2023, and it was a very scary endeavor a little bit. I was very nervous about it, but I had wanted to do it forever. And I finally got up the courage and started my YouTube channel. And I've just had some beautiful comments and support and people subscribing. And I just want to say thank you so much for that, because it has meant the world to me this year. And so anyway, just wanted to come back and insert that real quick because I had to say thank you. I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead of you as we move into 2024, and that you have a healthy and happy new year. Warmest wishes to you and yours. I really look forward to chatting about books with you in the new year. See you soon. Bye.